Hello, welcome to the News Tech Makers, a podcast where we talk about at-scale application development, deployment, and management. Thanks for joining us today. This is Swapnil Bhartia for the News Tech, and we are here at KubeCon Austin, Texas. Let's meet today's guest.
I'm Brandon Phillips. I'm the CTO and co-founder of CoreOS. And CoreOS, if you're not familiar, has been in the ecosystem around containerization from the very beginning. We were the first company to introduce an enterprise product around Kubernetes almost 2.5 years ago. And we've been building a lot of the technology in the open source that makes this whole ecosystem go, from kind of the brains of Kubernetes with etcd to the layer of abstractions that let networking vendors work together around the Kubernetes ecosystem, and really up and down the stack, from the very bottom where all the nuts and bolts and distributed systems happen, to the very top where application developers take their code and transform it into containers. And so really up and down the stack, CoreOS has been there building products and helping customers adopt all this technology over the last 5 years.
I mean, CoreOS has been a real disruptor, whether it was Rocket or where it was the whole movement behind the container runtime and container image specification. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, during the most recent CNCF board meeting, a lot of the board members reflected on how much of an impact that we've had on making this ecosystem work. We're a small company, but we very doggedly pursue all the technology that is required to make the ecosystem work. Even at times when it may be difficult to make the right call. Internally, we have this core value of boldly go, taken from Star Trek, which is really like, what can we do? What is the right call to make in order to make our products and our customers and the ecosystem successful? And I'm happy to say that people recognize us for that. So.
CoreOS is a relatively new company and you have a smaller staff. So how do you happen to be so disruptive? What is your secret sauce?
I think that's kind of the secret sauce of the company, is just regularly being a couple of years ahead of the curve. I mean, we called Kubernetes in July of 2015, and now we're sitting at the end of 2017, and every major cloud provider is cooperating around this technology. And that's unprecedented. Right. When, besides virtual machines, what have all the major cloud providers agreed upon? Nothing, except this, really. Right. And so I think that really just goes back to us really working closely with a lot of the early pioneers and customers that are doing this stuff and thinking hard about what does it look like 2-3 years out for these customers and these users. And that's been our laser focus from the very beginning.
Let's talk about Kubernetes. It's everywhere these days. Everybody is using it. And as these new players are coming in, bringing in their own use cases, what are the risks of Kubernetes losing its focus and kind of become a bit bloated? So let me break it down in two pieces. Number one is, what is the focus of Kubernetes? And second is, what are the risks of the community losing its focus as these new use cases and new users are coming in?
The focus of Kubernetes, to me, is removing all the work. This is something that we debate a lot, is Linux was a competitor to UNIX. The Apache web server was a competitor to Microsoft's IIS. What is Kubernetes competing against? And really, there wasn't a closed source product that we're competing against. What I feel we're competing against is all the scripts and entropy that people have to build, from I have source code running on my laptop to deploying it in production. And there's been 1,000 things that do that. People have CI/CD workflows with a bunch of bash scripts, or they use configuration management, or they use both. And that's always like a really painful cycle of 6 weeks to like 6 months of development of just all the stuff necessary to get something into production. And so I think that's what Kubernetes is doing initially, is shortening that cycle and creating APIs around that cycle that are really, really consistent and repeatable and can fit any model. Unlike PaaS, which was only fitting like load balancer, application tier, Kubernetes can model anything. I mean, we've proven it with running OpenStack on Kubernetes, which is a super complex app. You see people running distributed databases like Cassandra on Kubernetes. And so the system is general purpose enough to take any model and collapse that time from running on my laptop to running in prod from weeks to months to really like minutes to a day at most. And that's where I think Kubernetes is starting. Over time, I think we'll start to take on the entire lifecycle of the application, from idea to monitoring to the application workflow of upgrading that application to eventual decommissioning. But we're starting with just really collapsing that idea to it running in prod timeline.
Kubernetes supports new use cases through extensibility. Can you talk about that?
So what we've been doing with our open cloud services, what you see a lot of people doing, extending the Kubernetes APIs, is going to continue. I think that the advantage Kubernetes has is it's a very, very easy API to extend. And by taking advantage of the Kubernetes APIs, you get role-based access control, you get RESTful clients, you get the ability to plug those into dashboards. And so I think the core set of primitives of Kubernetes are able to handle the fundamentals of network, storage, and compute. And really the sky's the limit on the abstractions that we build on top of that, whether it's abstractions like we've built for lassoing applications and doing all the monitoring for an application using the Kubernetes APIs, or it's abstractions for how do you view the components and dissect the components of an application. Those are all APIs that you can build on top of Kubernetes and use the Kubernetes kind of core infrastructure to make it happen. So I think we're in good shape, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this evolves over the next couple of years.
Cloud has kind of become a playground for three major players. What role does Kubernetes play there to ensure that customers have some options and they're not logged into a particular provider?
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting point in the entire ecosystem of cloud. We've essentially established that there's going to be three major vendors. There's going to be Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And those three vendors are going to be the ones that customers are constantly negotiating against. I think the real opportunity with Kubernetes is that if we do it right, we're able to give people the ability to keep their same teams. Their teams can keep those same skills, and then they're able to use those skills against any of the cloud providers. I think that's going to be really fundamental. Lock-in is, I think, three parts. First part is people. That's the hardest thing. Retraining people, getting them out of their existing known workflows. And Kubernetes allows them to have workflows that work anywhere. The next bit is application, where you might be tying yourself to something like an Amazon Aurora or something that you can only get from Amazon, or Amazon DynamoDB. Your application is, like, besides people, is going to be the second most expensive thing you've built. Teams are the most expensive thing to build. Applications are the second most expensive. And so you need to think about, how do I ensure there's no lock-in around the application? How do I know that I'll be able to get that same database from another vendor? And then the last one is infrastructure. And Kubernetes, in the first 2 years, has done a good job of abstracting away that infrastructure piece, making it so that compute, network, and storage kind of works consistently across all those different environments, whether it's on-prem or cloud or across multiple clouds. And I think that's kind of the three tiers of problems around lock-in that I think about a lot.
Fair enough, but what are the risks of people getting logged into platforms like Tectonic itself? How do you ensure there is no vendor lock-in there?
Yeah, so the way we do it is we build against open source APIs. And what we do is we split the difference between what the clouds provide, which is hosting plus automated operations, which is I don't have to worry about those load balancers being upgraded against the latest TLS issue or whatever. And we provide software that is open source plus automated operations, which means that you're free to choose whatever hosting you want. And we ensure that we use open source APIs, unlike the cloud providers doing something like DynamoDB or BigQuery. We're going to use things like Vault or Prometheus, where those systems are fully open and they're portable across any environment. And that's what we do with Tectonic, is we give you those open source APIs that you can take anywhere, and then we give you the advantages of cloud, where it's like one-click, fully managed services, but they run across any environment. It's free from the hosting. And I think that's going to be the big leverage point that people are going to have is, look, this other cloud provider just lowered prices. Am I actually capable of taking advantage of that price advantage? And for a lot of people, that's a big question mark in the organization. We had somebody briefing us or talking to us about new controls that they're including at Pinterest around you can't use this cloud service because in the future we may move off of our current cloud. And so a lot of organizations are thinking about what are the services that we just can't allow our developers, our people to use, because it'll cause us to not be able to make that business decision later of we're going to move or put some of our workload on a different cloud. And so it's starting to emerge as a big question, particularly for people with really large cloud spend.
Since we are talking about CoreOS product, can you talk about what kind of products and solutions you have for customers?
Sure. So Tectonic is our enterprise Kubernetes platform. And the thing that we do, we've been talking about open source, is we just ship the latest version of Kubernetes. So Tectonic 1.8 includes Kubernetes 1.8, and then we build a bunch of services into Tectonic to make it faster and easier for people to consume Kubernetes. And so the big thing that we've added in this release is what we call open cloud services. And these are infrastructure level services that applications will consume. So we have Prometheus, Vault, and etcd. And we see monitoring and metrics. Essentially, none of the clouds are tackling the problem of how do I monitor, alert, gather metrics around containers in particular. They have that all for the VMs and all their other cloud services, but not for containers. So we've built that in so that people can have an open source API they can consume across any cloud that focuses on those problems around container monitoring. And then secrets, I feel, are the first really big lock-in that a lot of people will feel when they move to cloud is I need access to this object store or this database, and we want to have an open source API that abstracts that away. So when you get secrets when you're running on Google or Amazon or Azure, you have the exact same API, which makes that portable, removing that cloud lock-in. I've seen way too many customers where their applications can't even start unless they're running on an EC2 instance. Unless they can talk to the EC2 IAM endpoint, their application just crashes. And that means that it's not portable. And so we're introducing services through our open cloud service catalog, open source, fully managed, and enable you to be portable across multiple environments. And that's what we're doing.
What does your roadmap looks like? And when you work on the next version, how do you ensure that it remains upstream? Can you talk about that a bit?
We have a team that focuses on upstream. And I think we've been a very good upstream contributor. A couple of us won awards from the CoreOS team for our contributions upstream. And really what we do is we sit down with our customers very regularly and engage with our field teams, which are part of our engineering teams that are embedded with our customers. And we just walk through where are you spending the most time? What's the next hurdle now that you've got Kubernetes installed, you've got your first few applications onboarded into the environment. And those are the problems that we're tackling. Things that we're seeing are, how do my applications get secrets? How do we make sure that this entire environment is secure and audible by our CISO and the security teams at our organization? How do I onboard more apps more quickly? And so our roadmap really focuses initially on those kind of problems of app onboarding. You'll see me talking about that during the keynote tomorrow. And then all these security and infrastructure problems. Upstream, you'll see us spending a lot of time inside of the authorization and authentication special interest group, or trying to figure out how to give pods cryptographic identity so that they can exchange that for other identities in the system, whether it's database credentials or TLS certificates. And so these are the sort of problems that we're tackling in the product, and then taking those things and moving them upstream as well. So.
Let's go back to the new use cases of Kubernetes. From your perspective, what are the new use cases that you are seeing are coming in, and what new challenges they are bringing with themselves?
Yeah, I think my mission is we've seen essentially 2x growth year over year of Kubernetes. And so I'm thinking about what are the roles inside of companies that we want to see in the Kubernetes community. I think there'll be all sorts of new stuff like IoT, et cetera. But I don't want this community to stop at network, compute, and storage. I don't want it just to be a community of people that worry about infrastructure all day. I want to see the app developers show up to this conference. I want to see the QA and test people show up to this conference. I want to see people who are just product managers of applications where people are having to build essentially cloud services for their company, whether that's selling tickets or selling airline tickets or whatever it is. I want those people to show up to the conference. And you're starting to see those people show up to the cloud conferences, but I want to have them showing up to the Kubernetes conferences. So I think it's really about building into the platform, extending our APIs to make those people happy and successful. I think that'll be our challenge and what I'd like to see out of Kubernetes over the next few years.
Right, and thank you for the explanation. We all know that orchestration has become or is becoming commoditized, and commoditization also means it's boring. So how do you keep excitement around it? How do you keep new players excited about it while it's still boring? And boring is actually good.
I think that we have to take inspiration from the cloud providers. What are the problems the cloud providers solved the compute, network, and storage problem a long time ago, and Kubernetes has solved the compute, network, and storage problem for containers now. And so we have to move up stack. What are the services that we're going to provide that make an application run? Like getting a process to run that's serving up an API or hello world is one thing, but what about the databases? Yes. What about the logging and infrastructure? What about the CI/CD integrations? I think those will be the problems that we have to tackle next. I don't want it to just stop at we're the open stack of containers.
I think Kubernetes is more or less like Linux of cloud. I think
exactly. It's a general purpose tool,
right.
And I want to bring everyone together who's using that tool for different purposes, whether they're a developer, an infrastructure person, all the way up the stack to like a product owner. So,
and from CoreOS perspective, what are the challenges for your company as such?
Yeah, I think the first, the big opportunity, which a lot of people approach us as a challenge, is, the cloud providers are coming into the space. You have a lot of new companies coming into the space that are offering Kubernetes. But I think that's a huge market signal that we don't have to have the discussion around how am I going to orchestrate my containers? The answer is Kubernetes. And so we've had a product in market for 2.5 years, and suddenly everyone's saying, you need to use Kubernetes. And we can say, we have Kubernetes. The thing that we'll have to do over time, the challenge will be continuing to move and introducing new and new services on top of Kubernetes that make our customers successful. So that's where you're starting to see what we've introduced most recently, the Open Cloud Services Catalog. But now that I have Kubernetes, what next? What do I do next? How do we make those application developers and application owners successful? And that's what you'll see us doing. And again, we're going to be a couple years ahead of the market, because we don't have to worry about building a Kubernetes product, unlike a lot of the other folks. We have a Kubernetes product that's in market. We have customers successful with it. Now we can focus on what's the next step, what's the next thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, and you have a track record, kind of keep coming up with, disruptive technologies or solutions that change. Yeah. So a lot of things will be happening. Anything else you would like to talk about that I forgot or missed in this? I think we touched upon some broader topics.
Yeah. I don't think there's a ton more to cover. Yeah. I mean, some pieces and parts. The Prometheus 2.0 work was done by the Prometheus community. We have a couple of really key developers there. And I think that's going to be a big moment for monitoring inside of containerized infrastructure, because we've reduced the cost of running containerized metrics collection so much that you're going to see all sorts of new use cases pop out. So today what we do in Tectonic is we do compute, network, and storage monitoring, tell you how much CPU it's using and how much RAM it's using, your applications are using. But by that 10x decrease in the resources we use to monitor that stuff, now we can start to be how many RPCs or how many HTTP requests failed or were successful inside of your container. What are the tenants that are making requests against your container, and give you kind of buckets of data, not just about the rough outline of the infrastructure, but how is the application performing, and start to do some of that stuff more automatically, which is things that we're starting to think about inside of Tectonic, but it's enabled by laying down that infrastructure with the Prometheus 2.0 work. So.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, and it was nice chatting to you again. And
sure.
Hopefully we'll catch up again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now back to our audiences. Thanks for watching. Listen to more episodes of the News Tech Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening and see you next time.